thanks very much. This is not traditional talk because also what I did was not a traditional transformation. And I want to start by thank you all to make this happen, also the organizers to put this together and also the sponsors. So I think that everyone deserves a round of applauses. And also today is very special for me because I have my family in the audience. So, you know, I'm very nervous and I was a little bit cranky last couple of days. So let's get this going. And for today, I'm going to share my experiences in the field applying team topologies. And also there is a bit of advertisement and product placement. And I hope to have time for Q&A. Spoiler alert, this talk doesn't contain team topologies diagrams. If you come here for this, I apologize, you will not see them. My story with team topologies started in January 2019. I met Matthew in Amsterdam. He came to DDD Europe. I was also speaking there. And I think that he tested some ideas how to discover boundaries. And when the book came out later in that year, I started to apply the practices because really resonate with me and was missing this language, these patterns that, although I had from domain-driven design, it missed. So it, on the moment, resonates with me. And you can see this. This is a bank in the Netherlands where I'm from, and I was involved on these transformations, and you can see, you know, the language on second article is very intentional, right? A team-first approach. So what I do is I'm an independent consultant that is involved on bridging strategy to implementation with the organization. So I'm involved on what is so-called these digital transformations. Insert the name as you want. And, you know, some of these examples, public examples, but I found some challenges along the way. And most of these transformations suffer from them. The first one is understanding the goals of change, because the goals are set far away from people's reality. And that leads to a lack of ownership when the implementation comes. People don't understand the goals. Why should do they? And the third one, there is a huge resistance to change. There are two examples. One is in the field story of Agile Alliance, whereas the program, we were the punching bag. Lots of people put out what they were feeling and tried to solve all the problems of the world there. But the second one is a story from the trenches. The first day that I was on that program, I was in a team that was enabling the change, and the person that was specialized on operations asked me, will I have a job after this transformation? And reflecting back, I start to see a huge impact on the well-being of people, not only mine, but also the people that work on these organizations. And I start to wonder, is there a different approach? What is there that we can use to support organization evolution? And I wonder that I cannot be the first one with this question. Can we have an approach that is puzzle solving rather than problem solving? Can we think, or can we stop to apply mechanical thinking to a social system? You know, I'm puzzling with this. So I start to have a different approach. And my recent experience in transformations is with an European telco. Among you, anyone work or worked at a telco? One person, so telcos are very industry companies. Person over there is saying yes. So to give you a bit of context for the rest of the story, these folks were already going through a change and moved from waterfall model to an agile model to Spotify. But they did this at a very special moment. They started preparing this on 2019, and they changed on February 2020, actually the organizational structures. Well, March 2020, all of us went home with a pandemic. So the challenge of changing from waterfall to Spotify are already big. Doing this from home, it's a mission impossible. But although they struggle, this also highlights frictions and inconsistencies across the organization, and flow was blocked. At the same time, the organization was doing what's so-called a NetCo-ServCo split. That means that they have two different companies, one to manage the physical assets, like the cables on the ground and backbone switches and all of these type of things. And the ServCo creates these services that you and I buy from a telco. Another important thing is that the executive team was already ready to shift gears. They had learnings from this movement from waterfall to Spotify model, and they already knew that top-down will not work. The organization is simply too big. Second one, copying models will also not working, which also makes things very interesting because they are already reason about that. And they want to explore and leverage team topologies. And back then, well, Sophie and Matthew were working with this company, spreading the awareness of team topologies, and then I continue the work. As of today, as far as I know, it's the biggest transformation because it was not just concerned to IT, was enterprise level, is enterprise level because they go on this evolutive journey. So it's a very interesting use case. And when I arrived, my first question was, where are the boundaries? Because the organization had a recognizable demand and supply model with a little twist. They had business, they had digital, and then they had IT. But it looked like hourglass. Business had segments and different brands, and then digital didn't have lots of people, and IT had lots of people, but very silo. So the organization looked like a straitjacket. And what they did was coordination to manage dependencies and try to have, organize everything in time, which we know that doesn't work. So let me just put this out, and this is a thing that I tell to lots of people. You cannot have fast flow of change if you don't have the proper boundaries. And the interesting thing is that if we look to the cover of the book, it says team topologies. But subtitle is very interesting. Organizing business and technology for fast flow. Fast flow, and lots of people forget about this and just focus on team topologies, but subtitle gives us a lot. So let me rant. This is my ranting space as well. Team topologies is not about having a platform. I see lots of people that they want their platform. Steve is saying yes. So you see the same stuff on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Team topologies, it's a pattern language that help us reasoning about options to evolve our organization. Matthew said in the morning that, this make us think, and luckily now we have a pattern language. But also, in this approach to help an organization on transformation, is that to face uncertainty, because the environment is uncertain, right? The organization had COVID, sales went through the roof because everyone upgraded the internet because they need to work from home. When I work with them, inflation was going up, war in Ukraine started, people start spending less money. So all of those predictions for your budget, throw them away, and they knew this. As a consultant, I cannot come and fix things. It's not possible. I don't have the knowledge how the organization works. Will be arrogant from my part and not even ethical. So we need to have an approach that is the opposite. What we need to do is to amplify the good knowledge, idea, and experiences that already exist in the organization. And for that was set up a task force with 4 directors, executives of that organization, and myself. And my job was to facilitate and enable, not to bring solutions. The goal of this group was to identify the operating model's principles. Although they have an operating model, they just really were into this fast flow way of working. They want to be faster. And they want principles that work for the organization, and especially for the organization to self-manage and self-organize across time. What are the principles that apply to their context? What can enable fast flow based on where they are? And especially how to have a human-centric design. Well, to start, to test the waters, we pick up a use case that the organization was struggling with, that is e-commerce and e-care. And this case was recognized, was part of their strategy because they want to move from traditional type of sales in brick and mortar shops to a more online type of sales. So how could we craft principles that allow fast flow in this area? And also was a good area because we could test and craft an approach that worked for that organization to discover boundaries because we couldn't copy models, right? And let me give two heuristics why this was chosen. The first one, if you go to explore and go on a journey like this, use a use case that is part of the strategy of the company. It needs to have the right size, and the right size, I cannot determine that. That's why the rest of the people could see the right size and have enough complexity. And the second heuristic is to try to avoid child posters. Why? Because it's very tempting to start with use cases that are simpler and easier to do, but if they are not core to what the company is trying to achieve, it will not reflect the reality, the types of challenges that you're going to find. I still remember on 2018 here in London on DevOps Summit, when bank talking about their DevOps transformations, that in off they did with 2 teams. Well, sorry, not sorry, it's too easy, right? And to reason about boundaries, we start to use domain-driven design. And the good thing about domain-driven design is also it's a pattern language with principles. And that allows us to, discuss and discover boundaries that allow for fast flow. And here is another heuristic. Try to use appropriate bodies of knowledge that works for your context, right? Suzanne said in the morning, she changed those 3 techniques, but there are more techniques that you can change. So, think about what applies to you. But this also has, the other side of the coin, and I resort to one of my favorite techniques that is event storming. I don't know if you know the technique. Works very well in certain situations, but, well, was a failure. Because we forgot to meet where people are, and we made too many assumptions. And this simply didn't work. We need to pivot, right? So therefore, we pivot to smaller sessions, and we leverage a modernization initiative that was with the organization, because they already map most of the value streams. That is a thing that we were trying to reason. How value goes, from idea to production, not technically, but how do they define products? How do they support products? How a physical device arrives to the customer? What are the levels of services that they have? This has some risks because we need to integrate the knowledge, but on the flip side, release some pressure with this big group. It might work in your situation, it might work against you. For us, it worked very well. When we present to the board the learnings, they could see the principles emerging and what they could use. And they challenge us, what if we apply these principles to the organization? Will they work? Will this be viable, or do we need to keep looking for? So we did. And for you to have an idea, I worked with this organization for about 1 year to continue to facilitate to do this at enterprise level. Make no mistakes, this takes time, especially at that scale. There was thousands of people in the organization. We didn't interview everyone, we didn't talk with everyone, but this takes time. It's not just crafting some platforms and off we go, this really takes time. Also, our group was focused on the enterprise level boundaries. And why? Because this group of people were with strategic thinking. There are more details that are done by people. And what we can learn from social sciences, what I'm being studied, is that it's okay to have designs that are incomplete since they are at the right level. And this is what we are trying to do. It was not top-down because we didn't design the teams. We actually start to put constraints in place about what are these big boundaries that the organization has. Also, the task force took an educational approach and used the time to discover and amplify the good things that the organization was doing. For instance, some folks in the business support systems area, they were already talking with IT operations how to streamline. So our job was to amplify this knowledge and connect more people to start to apply the same principles, because someone in the organization was doing that. Another one was the folks in the architecture that they knew that doing ivory tower architecture doesn't work. They start to apply domain-driven design across the organization, but they hit a wall because they found the organizational system was fighting against them. So learning about team topologies gave them the nuances that they need. This is possible because looking to the pattern language, 2 out of 7 patterns are there, right? Enabling teams, this is what we were, and we were facilitating the organization. So if we're going to read these, we can see the types of behaviors. We tried to understand. We didn't impose. I couldn't impose my knowledge. Stay ahead of the curve. They knew that they need to inject team topologies knowledge. That's why I was there. We act as a messenger between these parties along the way. Sometimes we act as a proxy. We avoid that, but we try also promote learning, bring these capabilities to the organization. And this is what Matthew and Manuel offer to us, is a clear language and set of behaviors that allow us to talk easily. But it doesn't end here. The organization, to have a sustainable change, needs more. And you keep hearing me talking about principles, and yes, we use a set of principles to move forward, and these principles only apply to that organization. I will like to validate if they could apply on those contexts, other contexts, but this is very important. And why this is important? Because in the moment that people need to make a decision, they can look to these principles, validate them, and make a decision. And this is what we want, this self-organizing, self-managed organization, not top-down. However, don't let principles become dogmas. This is how we look back and say, oh, this is an old habit. Well, because before wasn't a principle, and we let that get roots. We didn't challenge, we didn't evolve. Everyone was on the first talk of the day with Matthew. What did we saw there? We don't call it platform teams. There was an insight that led this pattern to evolve. We only have 3 team types and we have a grouping. This is an example that we experienced this morning, how things evolve and how we don't become dogmas. This is quite cool. The same applies to the principles inside of your organization. Also, the goal of using principles is to have coherence, not uniformity. And this is also very important because the organization is big. The organization has B2C, B2B, other wholesales, different types of things that you do the business in different ways. What we don't want is the organization to look like the same, because the people that work on those organizations, we are not equal. We are attracted by different challenges. And actually what we want is coherence of actions. Have a mission, have a purpose, and have a coherence of actions. Not everyone behave on the same way. Another thing that you need to consider and add on top of this is consider the organization as a whole, not as the sum of parts. I need development and marketing and sales and legal, and please don't do that. Look to your capabilities, right? Look to your user needs. Rich gave today, show us how we can look to the needs and ways to do that. And the operating model needs to be coherent and has multiple aspects. As people, needs to cover structure and accountability, governance, technology, ways of working, all of that. And needs to evolve together, right? Because if you change something in your technology, your processes needs to change. If you try to, have a different type of product, you need different people with different skills to design those, right? We're going to go to 6G, that is a different set of technology, a different type of knowledge. We need to keep evolving the organization on that. And that's why the previous attempt of changing the operating model of that organization, they suffer. Because in those cases, on that case, they didn't include technology. And they, had levels of coordination that I never experimented before. And also as part of our work, we enable executives to come with these boundaries, but also we have ways to test the principles. And the three ways that we had to test the principles and to make sure that we have a human-centric design with manageable levels of team cognitive load was the following. One, Dunbar's number. The departments that are emerge shouldn't have more than 150 people. Thanks to team topologies to bring these to the forefront, we can manage on that way. The second one was technology ownership, and the third one was strategic goals, because also they are multi-branded. What are the different strategies of the brand? It's integrated, it's selling products, it's younger folks, older folks, you know. So they could have this fractal organization. And by generating these options to move forward, it's what Matthew was saying in the morning. All of these decisions, putting the lenses of fast flow, start to emerge. And one of the things that emerge is technology, some applications cross boundaries. And this was very good because in conversations with CFO, I could tell him, look, you have now these decisions. If it stays like that, you need coordination. Going to be expensive, more cognitive load. But now you need to start assigning your budget if you want to solve the problem on this side or the problem here. Became visible. And this was very, very positive to the organization. But last but not least, don't design for people. Design with people. And this is what we did, right? And this is what is not typical transformation, because we took care about the bigger boundaries, but the departments that emerge, they need to start defining their interfaces. And the teams that emerge inside of those departments needs also to define their interfaces and how everyone talks with each other. What is the current state? What is the desirable state? Interesting enough, this is nothing new. Since the 50s, social scientists are being studied and applying these techniques outside of IT, which makes very interesting. So as an organization, you need to have this in mind, to not treat people as cogs in a machine, and to help the organization to acquire these capabilities and move forward. The organization absorbed this way of working, and they are going on their own path, still moving and adapting. And the interesting thing is that they broke the traditional pattern of business and IT. It's the first organization that I work that now has capabilities. No more business and IT. And this makes things very, very interesting. Now, what I learned is that combining team topologies and domain-driven design and what social sciences teaches, we can have a very powerful tool set to navigate uncertainty. We cannot predict the world. We can learn from the environment. We can plan against that, learn quickly, and pivot. And this is crucial to develop these capabilities inside of the organizations to be adaptive, right? So what I really, really like with team topologies is that give us this language and at the same time respects the limits that we have as a humans, right? The famous cognitive load cannot go around that, right? Machines are getting more powerful. Our brain stays the same for a couple of hundreds, thousands of years. Different time spans. So now we are going towards the end. Before that, I show the sign. A bit of advertisement. The story will feature on a couple of places. This book from Nick Toon, he announced that the last two chapters are on, so going to be published. There are more details, and there you can see diagrams. So that can be interesting. But soon at Team Topologies, a case study going to be published where we're going to have more and more details about this. Stay tuned with that. My personal advertising space is that I also want to announce that myself and my good friend Trond, we are about to sign a contract to write a book about putting these techniques together. Because we think that we can and should learn a lot from social sciences, but also we have very applicable bodies of knowledge that works. In this case, team topologies. If you want to know more, we already have a workshop that we're going to run this year. We can practice with this. Sorry for the injecting this, but check this out if you are interested. My name is João. You can find me on social media. I have the pleasure to be a Team Topologies value practitioner. And once again, thanks very much to be here.